Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Kind of a fun but kind of tough project at the same time today I'm going to be sharing with you. We've got our finished product here. Had to wrap a post that was very twisted and bowed, but I'm extremely happy with how everything turned out, and I'm going to show you how I went about wrapping these posts and header details. This is a modern home and it ended up coming together really well into this kind of unique detail in this entry area. So stay tuned, we'll get right into it. So the first thing I had to figure out was how wide of a column I needed to make in order to accommodate the bow that is in this post. Now to do that, I ended up using two green line lasers here. I've got those positioned on the ground, and what that allowed me to do was to basically line them up so I could capture the widest section with these two line planes, so I would know the minimum post dimension that I needed. Now here's a really exaggerated example. Let's say this is my post and I've drawn it here and it's got a really nice bow in it, and I want to wrap this thing with a wood column. Basically what I'm doing with my line lasers is I'm taking my lasers and I'm aligning the farthest points on both sides of the post, and that gives me two lines. And basically, obviously, again, this is exaggerated, but that means that this distance from this point to this point is the interior dimension of my post wrap. So in order to figure out this minimum dimension, we had to shoot the lasers from this side, and then I also had them moved over and we shot them from this plane too, and I was able to kind of determine the planes and the lines where I wanted to start things. From there, I kind of figured out where I wanted my header boards to be, and we'll get into that in a second. For our header detail up here, kind of interesting, but I had to try to make it look as good as possible with kind of a modern design to it. So I had to wrap the framing material that's up there, and as you can see, I've already got these boards installed on the top and bottom just for the sake of speeding up the video and so you can see how it goes together a little bit quicker. We've also got biscuit slots up there, which I'll show you how that works in a second. This is a mock-up of the header detail and basically the wrap that's going to go around it. The framing material would be on the inside here. You'll notice I've got a little rabbit detail on this board, and then our side pieces are going on, and I've got slots mortised for biscuits here, and you can see that on my pieces that are already up there. Basically all I need to do now with what I've already got installed is to put the side pieces in place, and again those side pieces will have identical biscuit slots, so we'll just push everything together with some biscuits and it should snap in place pretty well. There are a couple design elements that I kind of want to talk about here that can really help you to do better carpentry and do it more efficiently. And one of those details that you can integrate into your work is a rabbit detail. So if you have a situation where you want to put different pieces together and have everything plane out flush, if you were to glue this up and try to create a glue line here that would be invisible, that would be pretty difficult. So if you rabbit a little relief in here, that can be a nice design feature that kind of allows you a little bit of forgiveness. To do that, I've just got my router here with a mortising bit and my edge guide, and then I just took a block of wood and kind of cut that out and got it positioned where I needed it to in order to have this nice detail along this board. Now, another thing that you want to do is use biscuits for alignment. Biscuits you can use for strength, and sometimes I just use biscuits because it helps me get things lined up. So for instance, whenever I install these sideboards, having all these biscuit slots is just going to allow me to snap things together quickly, and it's automatically going to flush everything out. At this point, we're ready to start installing these side header pieces. As you can see, I've got a bunch of these biscuit slots. Basically, I had my top and bottom header pieces installed, and I left the mark where I mortised those biscuit slots. I put my header piece up there, transferred those marks, and then mortised all these slots. So once it's time to install, we should be able to just pop these right into place. After we get these installed, my posts, this is just a mock-up of the general size of what this post will be. It's gonna go all the way top to bottom, but we'll get into that more in a little bit. All right, now in theory, I've got all of my biscuits in their slots, so in theory, this should all just go together seamlessly like butter. We'll see how it goes. So far, so good. I'm gonna go ahead and just take a clamp and put it on here just to kind of keep it in place while I work the other end. Yeah. So that went absolutely fantastically. Now on the end of this board, I've got a miter. So whenever I'm working alone, getting that in the exact correct position so that this miter on this outside corner comes together perfectly is going to be difficult. So what I did there was I made a jig, and I knew I needed to have this offset 1 inch because of the thickness of the board. So I took my 1 inch board, and then I added another board on top of that, which allowed me just to run this piece into that, so I've got it in the exact place that it needs to be, which makes installation a lot easier. So now I can go ahead and just pop off my jig here. As you can see, it's nothing special, it's just 2 boards nailed together, but using jigs like this allows you to get things aligned perfectly where you want them. All right, we're gonna put our mitered piece on here, and you'll see that being that I use that jig, this should go together really nicely. Again, just hoping everything kind of just snaps into place. It does, and everything is just about perfect over here as well. So I'll go ahead and throw a clamp across the top of this to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, and I'll start working this corner together, making sure that it's perfect. Okay, cut. Well, it doesn't always go this way, but so far everything is fitting together exactly how I hoped it would. It's snapping together like a puzzle, so very happy with how things are going together so far. Okay. One thing you'll notice that as I'm going along, this is a stain grade beam, so I'm using some 2-inch 18 gauge brad nails to nail everything together. That way we've got a nice small nail hole. But there always is some warping and twisting in this lumber, so as I'm going along, I'm using my clamps and I'm pulling it together as I go to make sure it's tight whenever I'm nailing it. And that way we get a nice tight joint the whole way. As I get down here, I've got a little bit of a gap, so throwing the clamp on just pulls everything together nicely because that board has a little bit of a twist in it. So these quick clamps work great for that. I also have a little bit of glue inside this joint, so it doesn't take too many nails, but with the glue, 18 gauge nails and the clamp, everything's going together really nicely. Okay, that went really well. We've got all of our header in. Now it's time to start doing the column wraps. This is a very tricky install, but I've got some tricks that'll make this go really well, a lot easier. So stay tuned. These are the kinds of things that you learn that will make your job a lot easier once you master them. Now it's time for us to put our post wraps around this column. And the difficult thing to figure out is how on earth are you going to shim this whenever you have bows and twists the whole way up. And a lot of you have probably seen this before, but one of the best methods that you can learn to shim in difficult situations is to use screws as shims. So I've got my lasers set up on the ground right now, and it's marking the two inside planes of my column. And what I can do then is use drywall screws wherever I want to put a shim. And basically, you're just going to use your drill and you're going to put it on first speed, and then you can adjust that screw in or out accordingly. And it's very easy to micro adjust to get it exactly where you want it and shim your whole column that way. Now I've got this little mock-up done just representing the size of what my post wrap is going to be. And one of the tricks that I use is I try and get two sides shimmed exactly where I want them, but then on these other two sides, I'll move my shims in a little bit. That way I've got a little bit of margin for error. You don't want to try and make this exact, because what could potentially happen then is whenever you're trying to put your post wrap around, if your shims are too far out, your post wrap won't come together and your miters will be open, which would be terrible. So I use two sides as my critical planes. In this case, I'm using these two sides right here because it's on the outside, but then our columns will just go right up against those screws and we can nail those off. You'll notice I also put some blocking in here just to fill in that gap a little bit. That's just going to help whenever I nail it off. You will notice we've got all kinds of different depths. You'll see here the screws out over an inch, and then if you come around to the other side, I'm only out about 3/8 of an inch. Again, that is because of how bowed this whole thing was. So screw shimming is a great technique in this kind of situation. Now the laser is all well and good, but it's only so precise. The laser is going to be an 1/8 inch wide plus, so it's hard to get that extremely precise. I want my reveals around here to be absolutely perfect, so that's not something I'm going to use the laser for. In this case, I want to create a gauge block, and I want to shim to my gauge block so I have a very, very precise reveal the whole way around here. You can see these screws are right on the money, and what that is going to do is it's going to ensure that whenever I put my column, my post wrap in place, it's going to ensure I've got that exact 1/4 inch reveal all the way around. So I've went around at all of these critical points here where I'm going to have my post wrap coming down and connecting into this header detail, and I've shimmed these screws exactly to where my gauge block is at. So we should end up with some really nice crispy reveals all the way around the outside of this. Over here I've got my post wrap ready to go. The way I like to do these is I'll rip one side of my miter with my track saw at 46 degrees, and then I run the other side through on the table saw at 46 degrees. And as you see here, I've got everything aligned and taped up, and we're going to attempt to miter fold this whole beam. So this is kind of the tricky part of the whole process. Whenever you do miter fold a column like this, you essentially have to just pull it over the table and start trying to fold it over because you need to get the face down. That way you can glue the whole thing. So it's kind of a tricky process, but I've done it many times. And there we go. And we'll lay it down. So now the inside of our miter is exposed. I can glue this. We'll fold it up and take it over and wrap it around the post. Okay. It looks good on top, but it looks twisted to me at the bottom. Guys, one thing that you want to watch out for, I was putting this in and I knew my reveals were perfect around top. I'm very happy with how that looks. Down here on the bottom, it was messing with my eyes and I felt like the post was twisted. So I grabbed this piece of baseboard and I threw it down in line with this wall, and then I also measured off of this wall to make sure I was running parallel with the whole space. And sure enough, my post is nice and square. You want to watch that, because if it's not and you run some plank flooring or something that has lines in it, if your post is twisted, it's going to look really bad. So thankfully we're all squared up here, and now we can move forward on burnishing and sanding these corners. You guys have seen me do this a lot on different videos. For your outside corners, one of the reasons we use the tape miter fold method here is because this is stain grade and we don't want to have a bunch of exposed fasteners. We don't want to have a bunch of nail holes to fill. So that tape is acting as a clamp, and we're going to leave that on there until this dries. But you still want to treat your corners a little bit and burnish them while your glue is still wet. So take something round like your nail set and just compress that outside corner. That's going to compress the wood, and then it's also going to allow that glue to work in there. And then if you hit that with some sandpaper, it's going to make that corner absolutely perfect. So I'm going to hit all of these outside corners real quick, get that taken care of. Whenever you go, I just try not to push real hard whenever I go over the tape. That way it doesn't accidentally cut the tape. And then we can pull this tape off later and finish everything up. One more thing I want to show you up here is this reveal detail we ended up doing up top. You'll remember whenever we did our header, I did that 1/8 by 1/8 inch rabbet on the underside here. We also continued that detail through here on the tops of these posts. So it creates a nice shadow line, gives you a little bit of forgiveness, and just adds a little bit of the same look and style flowing through the whole thing. So that's another detail I did at the top of this post wrap, and then I'll continue that on these other post wraps as we go up the rest of the way. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll be honest, I was absolutely dreading doing this detail for weeks, but I'm really happy with how everything turned out. One of the things I'm really happy with is we went with a larger beam here. Initially, we had a 6x6 post, which would have netted about 7 inches if it would have actually been straight. That post would have been way too skinny. So the fact that I actually had to make these post wraps wider to accommodate the bow and twist in the beam ended up making it look pretty good. But I'm really happy with it. I like the rabbet details on the undersides of the beams, as well as up above, how we did the rabbet detail going around the top of the post wraps. Just gives it a really cool modern look with some nice crisp reveals. So let me know what you think in the comments section. Again, it went together well. Even though it's kind of a unique detail, I'm really happy with it.